Hello, people. I'm here today with a vinyl unpacking. This is a Gary Numan album called Splinter. Um, I'll get to it in a minute. I have to apologise. This is take two because I did take one and realised that I hadn't actually been recording. So I've taken off the plastic seal of it. But I just wanted to kind of like share with you the condition and stuff that this album has come in. Okay. Um, and also, just quickly, for those of you that perhaps are not familiar with Gary Numan, just give you a sort of slight sort of historic breakdown of his classic albums. Okay, because I followed him fairly loosely throughout the 1980s. At one point, I was, absolutely and well into him, and then I kind of like got a bit bored, as I think looking at his biography called "Praying to the Aliens," I think so did he, or at least he certainly started really struggling, and the albums really suffered for it. So I'll do a quick resume of the earlier albums that that he's so well known for, and then I'll talk about the new one which I've just got. Okay, I've got some of my vinyl here to show you. I've got a lot of the other albums on CD, so I'll get to it. Okay, in 1978, sort of bordering on 1979, he released his first album. Now, this was a very punky album. It was done under the name of Tubeway Army, which was his first group. It was him, his uncle Jess, and his best mate Paul Gardner. Paul Gardner, who sadly died of a heroin overdose in 1981 or 82. 81, 82, something like that. This album, it doesn't contain any ultra well-known Gary Numan songs, but it does have one or two classics which he played on tour quite a lot throughout the 1980s. My Shadow in Vain and Every Day I Die being the two real standout tracks. Now I've got that album on cassette somewhere, and it still works, or it did the last time I played it. I might have to play it again today, just to sort of check it's okay. In 1979, he sort of, as I said, the first album, which was sort of begun in 1978, was very guitar and punky based. And he'd come into the studio to record Replicas, the second album, kind of like in the same sort of mould. But then he found that there was a Moog synthesizer in the studio, and he went over to play with it because he's a bit of a gadget freak and really loved the sounds and everything. And so he asked them to order up one for the sessions for Replicas, and the synthesizers then got used fairly prominently on this album. It's still quite punky and guitar-y, but with the added textures that synthesizers can add. Contains his first #1 single. So here's Replicas. Now this is a sort of a low price reissue. So it's got Gary Numan and Tubeway Army there, but the originals will just have Tubeway Army up here. Okay, and they won't have this low down thing in the corner. I don't know if you can see there. Okay, but he's dressed up as, I think, a Mac man there. Either a Mac man or a friend. I can't remember which. But it's all very science fiction-y. And had the eye on here. Okay, the classic standout tracks on here are the #1 single, Our Friends Electric, which was sampled by the Sugar Babes a few years ago. So people who don't know Our Friends Electric will know the riff because they'll have heard the Sugar Babes song. It's pretty ubiquitous. Me I Disconnect From You is another standout track which just gets played on tour all the time, and Down in the Park is the other absolute standout track. But this album is absolutely classic. Okay, it's really beautiful, and people sort of say Gary Numan, sort of weird person with lots and lots of images and stuff like that, and and they kind of laugh at him a little bit and poo-poo him because he's you know, because he's so weird. But actually, he's a brilliant. Absolutely brilliant melody writer in particular, and a good sort of arranger of noises, as he called it himself. So you know, the layers and textures on here, you know, even though it's very basic, are, you know, really good. So yeah, thoroughly recommended that album. Album 2 by this was also 1979, and it was there was a time where Our Friends Electric had been #1, Cars had been #1, which is the standout single on this album, and this album was also at #1 as well. It's you know, again, it's a classic album, but for me, it's not the best. It has got some, you know, some lovely work. By now, we're almost all synthesizers here. Hardly a guitar in sight, really. But I say we're all synthesizers, but there's also some viola work on there, played by Chris Payne. There's a lovely song on here called Complex, which has his viola work on there. And also, there's a lovely song called Me, M.E. which is you know, extremely good, and again has been sampled by people, although I don't know exactly who, but I've heard it sampled in various different sort of records and things. So that would be another sort of fairly familiar number on there. But for me, this is not this album doesn't gel as well as Replicas did. It's got a really long drawn out number on it called Conversation. Now, when he did his so-called farewell gig in 1981, when he decided he'd had enough of touring and wanted to sort of take a back seat, as it were, he sang this song Conversation. There's a double CD called Living Ornaments 81, which you can get, and even then they omit the song Conversation. It's reduced to a bonus track in mono that's just been taken straight from the mixing desk, and it really isn't very good. So yeah, you know, slightly iffy, this album, but it's okay. Now, hold on. Album number 3, he really got his act together for, Telecon. These red and white stripes here, another famous Gary Numan image here. Okay, on the back here he is sort of loads of dry ice and in the boiler suit with the Telecon stripes on it, and this thing here which is looking very sort of futuristic and everything, but in fact actually it's a Hoover tube. But yeah, you know, it was 1980, okay, and things in 1980 were still nowhere near as sort of pristine and sort of, I suppose, well marketed, you know, as nowadays. And you know, nowadays everything's sort of, you know, it's too smooth. There's no rough edges at all. This album is full of rough edges. It's dark. Now this is the British album. Unfortunately, this was a second-hand one. It didn't come with the poster and the I Die You Die single, which I can remember when I first got this album, and I swapped it with my mate actually for the American edition, because I liked I Die You Die on the album, and there was one song on here that I didn't like so much, which was Sleep by Windows, which now I adore, by the way. And I swapped it, and I swapped this album, and when I swapped it, I swapped the single and the poster as well. And then somewhere or other, I've still got the American album somewhere in storage somewhere, and much later I bought this, but this is the British one without the CD, without the single and the poster. But this album sort of really contains a lot of musical devices which really hold it together, which hadn't been present on the first 2 albums. There's a real sense of musical unity with this, and it's all based around a 7th arpeggio, which you'll hear in all sorts of guises on the album. Let me just hop up and quickly play it to you. This is the intro to this wreckage. Sorry. I had to drag that up from years and years and years ago. Me and my mate worked out just about every Gary Numan song that there was, and we played them. We were a band, and we played them to various people at gigs and stuff like that. Kind of Gary Numan tribute band. But yeah, brilliant album, and it's got on it this Wreckage, which is a pretty good standout track. Remind Me to Smile, which gets played at on tour an awful lot. The Joy Circuit, which is, you know, more strings and violas and violins and things on there. And for me, the most beautiful standout track is the title track Telecom, which is quite weird to start with, and you know it's a grower, but yeah, it needs to be played. It's brilliant. Okay, sorry, I'm taking too long over this. On CD, unfortunately, the 2000 odd, you know, the year 2000 odd remasters, they're remastered in the early 2000s, are not very good. They're very bright. And Dance really suffers from that, because Dance, for me, is one of my favourite Gary Numan albums, if not my favourite. It's very underrated. It contains the single She's Got Claws, which kind of made the top 20 in England, but didn't sort of do very much after that. But it's very introspective and atmospheric, and the songs are based around a failed relationship that he had with a woman who then went and sort of told her story to the newspapers, and he was like really irked by it, and yeah, so yeah, this album contains an awful lot of that bitterness, but it's very dark and moody. As I say, you know, his synthesizer textures and stuff are absolutely gorgeous, and there are whole patches of instrumental work. There's a number called "Cry the Clock Said," which goes on forever and ever. It's about 9 minutes long, but it's not like Conversation, which you just think, you know, for God's sake, stop. You know, the textures in "Cry the Clock Said" build up and build up and build up and build up, and the actual melodic tune is so beautiful, and so, you know, it really, you know, gets you there. And you shouldn't think like it's like synthesizer music. It's metallic, it's robotic, you know. But as I said in one of my earlier videos, where I sort of bemoaned the overuse of synthesizers, you know, where these things are being played by hand and used intelligently, and these are analog synthesizers, you know, they're not, you know, the ubiquitous Yamaha DX7 that got overused in the early 80s. You know, these are analog synthesizers, and they really do have emotion and depth to them. You know, another album, Dare by the Human League, you know, it's just full of these real gut-wrenching synthesizer textures. Oops, daisy, my computer's going to sleep. Just have to wake it up again. Okay, yeah, and you know, Dance is full of that. So, you know, really, 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 you know, get Dance. It's great. But if you can, try and get the album rather than the CD, because it's too bright. The CD is, as are all of those early 2000s masters. Okay, this is I Assassin from 1982. Gangster Image from here. Now, the real die-hard fans will say that after I Assassin, Gary Numan really lost it, or even with I Assassin, Gary Numan really lost it. I don't believe he did. You know, this was when I was just starting to get into him, so I'm thinking, oh, I Assassin, it's brilliant. You know, I was first attracted by this cover, which I think is, you know, absolutely stunning. Okay, it has for me a couple of classic songs on here. Music for Chameleons and We Take Mystery to Bed are the two standout tracks on here, but they're all good. Okay, very jazzy now. He's, you know, starting to really sort of expand his musical vocabulary. He wasn't, although, you know, people say, oh, Gary Numan synthesizers all the same bloody thing, but actually, no, he's not. He was always trying to push his musical palette and trying to find new things to add. And so by here, you know, it's all sort of 1930s-y, jazzy, with the synthesizers as well. But, you know, there's a song on here called A Dream of Siam, which is very oriental. And, you know, yeah, he's such a clever bloke. So that's I Assassin. Berserker, this is where... Oh, sorry, no, I've jumped an album. Warriors was his next album, which was funkier. Contains a lot of sort of bass someone Hubbard, Joe Hubbard, that was his name, contributed the bass to that. And I think it was reading the CD liner notes. I think there was a bit of dispute on there between production values, and I think he changed his producer sort of somewhere, you know, sort of about halfway through, because they just didn't see eye to eye on things. But yeah, it's a mixed album for me, Warriors. I like it. It's got some really good numbers on there. This Prison Moon's very good. Sister Surprise is brilliant. And the title track itself, Warriors, is brilliant as well. But yeah, it's you know, it's one of his least memorable numbers. Okay, by Berserker, he'd invented his record label, Numa Records, and he'd also discovered the Fairlight synthesizer. And now we're going back to my first synthesizer video that I made again. And the point that I was making there was that when people let the synthesizers just take over and do what the blinking heck they want, that, you know, it starts to lose some of its sparkle and creativity. And yes, I think Berserker itself was, you know, it was a passable LP. It has got some good numbers on it. This Is New Love is very good. But yeah, it's, you know, it's very so-so. And by now, all his albums have now really started to lose it. I first went to see Gary Numan on the White Noise tour. This is the Berserker tour. This is his Berserker image, okay, with the blue hair and the white sort of looks like a martial arts outfit there. And yes, you know, he was brilliant and everything, but he was, you know, really starting to lose it. And the Fury, for me, now this is a picture disc and it's actually broken, it's actually snapped, but I'm keeping it anyway. I wouldn't dare play it now. It played okay when I first got it, but these picture discs tend to be made of much more brittle vinyl, and yeah, it's snapped unfortunately. But there's the Fury for you, and yeah. After that, I don't really give a fig too much about Gary Numan until around about 2010, 2011. He released this album called Dead Sun Rising, which is, you know, I've got the CD here. This is absolutely brilliant. It's a return to the old sort of Gary Numan values of, you know, Telecon and the first two sort of punkier albums, but it's so well done. It's absolutely brilliant. Very dark. I thought, you know, because he went through sort of a phase of writing, you know, what for me would almost be sort of religiously offensive albums, you know, albums where, you know, he wrote about Mary being raped by soldiers and Roman soldiers and that sort of thing, which, you know, I just think is, you know, perhaps, you know, for me at any rate, not for other people, I wouldn't judge other people, but for me, it's too dark. This is, you know, this is, you know, it's still very dark, but he's, you know, it's not oppressive, okay? So for me, the standout tracks on here are Big Noise Transmission, Dead Sun Rising, which is the title track. The album is called Dead Sun, as in like it's the son of a father. The single is Dead Sun, as in the sun in the sky rising. Okay. When the sky bleeds, he will come is my absolute favourite. And The Fall, again, is, you know, absolutely brilliant. The Fall is, there's a brilliant video for that on YouTube, so I'll bung that in the links down there. Okay, I'm going on far too long. Right, so his latest album, the one after Dead Sun Rising, I've ordered on vinyl. Now, I have to say, I ordered this from Gary Numan's website, and I let my fingers slip too much on my Magic Trackpad, and didn't check my address, and it had an old address on there. And it was very easy, I have to say, which is unlike a lot of websites, EE. for example, where you can't find a support or a help thing, you know, for looking. But I was able to very quickly send them an email saying, look, I've sent you the wrong contact details. Within half an hour, I got a reply saying we've amended your contact details. And then the next day, the album arrived in the post. Okay, so you know, full marks for that. It's available in any number of different kind of sort of packs. You can get ones with t-shirts and hoodies and all sorts of things with it as well, but I've just got the basic vinyl album. Now when you consider that there are some vinyl albums which go for like 40 quid on eBay and stuff like that, which you know, and these are new albums. I looked for Emily Sandé's album on there once upon a time, and I thought 45 quid, you are got to be kidding me, you know. This was 15, okay? It's like something like 17 euros or something like that. And here it is, okay? I have already opened it, I'm afraid. The first sort of take I did of this, where it wasn't actually recording me, I took the plastic off and opened it up. But what you get is this, okay? This is a double album, which means that the songs can be, it's the same number of songs that are on the CD, but spread out over 4 sides means that you can actually sort of get a better master, as it were. Nice sort of gatefoldy stuff open there. Credits that you can actually read as opposed to the CD. Credits that you actually get as opposed to a download. A genuinely signed card here with a picture of Gary Numan's latest image on there. I'm not sure what the furry scarf is all about, but yeah, he's still looking good at 50 odd. Well done, Gary. Okay, we have the lyrics. Now look, come on, you just don't get this on a download, people. Come on, look. It's just beautiful, lovely artwork here. And the albums, both the albums are in good state, okay? And for good measure as well, just so that you can bung the things on your iPod, you also get a little card with a code on it that you can enter so that you can actually just download all the songs free of charge, because now you've bought them, you can download them free of charge to shove on your iPods or similar. Okay, all right, I've gone on far too long there, and I didn't really mean to, but there we go. Gary Numan for you. Okay, brilliant. See you later. Bye.